Hi guys, just before we get into the video, I just want to point something out quickly. I shot this video on the 19th of April, and since I shot the video, another YouTuber rather, has released a video highlighting something in the plugin which I'm going to talk about today. And I just want to point out that this video is not an answer to their video because I shot it before their video, and it's not a diss video or anything like that. I know what the community can be like and they love a bit of drama. So I just want to point that out. This is not a diss video in any way whatsoever or an answer video in any way whatsoever. And I'm just sticking to the facts. Hello, welcome to the Quakes Motel. My name's Conan. In today's video, we're going to be looking at EQ visualization, visual EQ, visual reference in the MPC Standalone. Let's jump in. Okay, so I felt the need to make this video because I feel that there is a certain amount of confusion with regards to visual EQ in the MPC, namely the Air Multiband Filterbank. This is a plugin which I think you have to pay for now, but was originally free. So a lot of you probably picked it up when it was free. Either way, it does have a visual reference for the signal. Now, before I get really into it, now this is just my opinion, and I say this on many occasions. The reason why I like to say it is because I like to try and emphasize the fact that in music, there is no right or wrong. In production, there is no right or wrong. And these are just my opinions, basically. And you can agree with them or not, because you're entitled to your opinion as well. I just want to make that absolutely clear. Now, when it comes to visual reference in mixing, I prefer, and this is my opinion, I prefer to not rely on visual reference. I guess it probably comes from the fact that I didn't used to have visual reference when I first started mixing in the 80s. And I try and tell my students that I work with that visual reference is okay, and it's a great teaching tool, and I'll explain more of that in a second. But you don't want to rely on it. Now, where it can be a good teaching tool, for instance, is surgical EQ, for instance. It's really useful to be able to home in on a particular room resonance or a particular frequency that needs to be cut out, not so much boosted, attenuated mostly. And you can use that. I use FabFilter Pro Q3 for that quite a lot, because no matter how well trained you are at identifying frequencies, you can't always identify or absolutely pinpoint a room resonance frequency, for instance, on a voiceover. So it can be useful. However, as a rule, generally, I don't like to rely on it in mastering and mixing. Now, visually, a reference for EQ, for instance, it's just a wavy line. Let's be honest. That's kind of what it is. So it's quite vague. It's not 100% accurate. But where it can be useful is it can give you a general idea of if the track's balanced in the highs and the lows in the mid-range, or if it's poking out too much in the highs or poking out too much in the lows. But I would hope that you would train yourself well enough to be able to identify whether there's too much low end, too much high, too much mid-range, just by using your ears. Now, I know I've seen people over the years hating on the phrase, trust your ears. And it can be a little bit patronizing and condescending sometimes, the way that people use it. Sometimes I see people use it when they can't really answer a question properly, so they just say, trust your ears. When it's used like that, it can be a little bit annoying, and especially to somebody who's new, who perhaps may have seen videos or may have been told that it's good to use visual references. And I'm not saying don't use visual references. I'm going back to this thing again where there's no right or wrong. But here's the argument for me against using visual reference. If somebody was to play me a song, and I closed my eyes, for instance, and all I used was my ears, I would like to think that quite quickly I could tell you whether there was too much lows, there were too many highs, too much mid-range, where the problems might be in the mix, whether it was balanced properly, whether I like it, whether it sounds good. Now, if I was to take that same song, or multiple songs actually, and just use visual reference, cover my ears, turn off my ears. Yeah, so all I could see was a visual reference. Now, I would be able to use that visual reference just for experience, and I'd know whether the highs and lows were okay, or whether there was something poking out. But I wouldn't be able to tell you whether I liked it. I wouldn't be able to tell you whether it was accurately balanced. I wouldn't be able to tell you whether it felt good. You know, all those kind of emotive experiences, you're not going to get that from visual reference. And for me, that's important in music. So whilst visual reference, I am going to get to the actual plugin in a second. Whilst visual reference is good, I prefer not to rely on it. And when I work with students, I try and get across to them the reason why it isn't good to 100% rely on visual reference when you're mixing for EQ, for compression, etc. Now, finally, and you can agree with this or not agree with this, obviously, I'm quite integrated into the community, the MPC community. So I follow a lot of forums, I'm on a lot of groups, and I quite often see people complaining about what's not available in the MPC, what the MPC should be able to do. And I don't just see this in the MPC, I see this in multiple communities, photography communities, other music communities, that they're always chasing this one extra thing that they need to be able to make them so that they can make the best photographs, the best films, the best music. They need this one extra thing. And for some time now, it has been a visual EQ reference in the MPC. And it's like, if I have that visual reference in the MPC, then suddenly I'm going to be able to win Grammys. Suddenly my mixes are going to be perfectly balanced. Suddenly everything's going to be brilliant. And before that, it was stems. Excuse me. Before that, it was stems. For ages, people were saying, we need stems in the MPC. And when we finally got stems in the MPC, loads of people complained it wasn't good enough, which, you know, I could have told you that was going to be the case just by the RAM in the MPC. But secondly, that wasn't enough either. There was something else that they needed. And it just goes on. And even if there was a 100% accurate visual EQ reference in the MPC, it's not going to suddenly make you a good producer or a good beat maker. I'm sorry, but that's, I can't say it's fact, but that's my opinion. And I truly believe in that. It might be able to help you, but it's not going to solve all your problems. So let's actually get into what I want to show you in the MPC. Now, sorry, I've been fighting off a cold all week. The Air Multiband Filterbank. Now, I've explained this in videos before. I think I actually even explained it in the Filterbank video that I did. The Filterbank, the EQs are basically filters at a very basic level. So you can use the Air Multiband Filterbank as an EQ. I'm not going to demonstrate that too much today because I've already made a video about it and there's a million other videos about it as well. But you have a very basic 3-band EQ here where you can move the crossovers around. You can use the cutoff and the resonance. You can use the drive, levels, etc. And you basically have a basic EQ. And when you play the signal, it gives you a visual readout. So I'm going to play a drum beat. So you can see it's giving you a visual readout. Now, the issue with this plugin is, well, there's a couple of issues actually, but the main issue with this plugin is that the visual reference that it gives you is before you use the effect, so pre-effect. So when you make any adjustments in the actual plugin, for instance, if I want to change the cutoff, you see it doesn't actually make any difference to the visual. There's no change there whatsoever. So it's not post-effect. So what you can do to make it post-effect is have your effects before and just use Air Multiband Filterbank as a reference. So for instance, I've got power EQ here. If I turn the filter on and I bring the right up so that I'm taking all the low end out of the drum beat. If I now go back into the Multiband Filterbank, you can see that all the low ends come out because in here, I've taken all the low end out. So you can use it like that. And, you know, huzzah, eureka, I now have visual EQ in the MPC and it's going to be post effect. I can put it at the end of my mastering chain, for instance, and I can get a visual reference. You know what's coming, don't you? You know I'm going to pull this apart in a second. Yeah, I've got a visual reference and it's brilliant. There we go. Now I can see exactly what's going on. However, there is a problem. Now the problem is this. This is iZotope RX. This is a plugin which I use and I have used for absolutely years, which I 100% trust in mastering and in mixing. And I trust the plugin. I trust the readout. I trust what it says. Now, if I was to play a 440 Hertz test tone, you can see from this plugin that it's giving me a readout of a 440 Hertz test tone. There you go. Absolutely. I 100% trust that. And I can tell you that I've tried it in a few other plugins as well. SPL, Hawkeye, a Eunice meter, a bunch of other meters which I know are reliable, and I 100% trust the results on them. And I get this 440 Hertz test tone. I play it through and I can see that it is at 440 Hertz. Now, let's get back to the multiband filter bank. Now, the problem with this, let's just make sure this is turned off. The problem with this is when I play a test tone through the multiband filter bank, you can see it's not accurate. Let's just do that again. Now you have to really if you look down here, you can see it's 500 Hertz. I had to use my magnifying glass to see that because I can't actually see it, but it's 500 Hertz, I think, around about 500 Hertz. But the fact is, it's certainly not 440 Hertz. And you can see the test tone is actually a little bit past that. So this readout is not accurate. So herein lies the problem. Whilst you do actually have a kind of visual EQ reference in the MPC, and you might have had that eureka moment, like I've shown you already, using it after an effect so that you get a readout of the effect and you can see exactly what's going on, I can tell you categorically that the readout on the Air Multiband Filterbank is not accurate. So there you have it. I felt the need to make that video because I had seen quite a lot of misinformation, I guess is the best word. I'm not picking holes in other people's theories, videos, information, etc. Well, I suppose I am actually. But what I just wanted to point out is just be careful. You can kind of use it as a visual EQ. Bear in mind that if you actually use the actual plugin, you're not going to be getting an accurate readout. You're also not going to be getting post-effect readout. So use it if you like, but bear in mind that you're not really, it's not really going to be accurate. And, you know, kind of what is the point if you're going to be relying on visual reference for it not to be accurate? And this goes back to why I think it's a better idea to train yourself to recognize 200 Hertz, 1000 Hertz, 1500, 5K. You don't have to train yourself to know how every single frequency sounds because that's ridiculous. But there tend to be problem areas or areas that sound good if you boost them. So if you get to learn how how a guitar sounds when you cut 200 Hertz out, how a bass guitar sounds when you boost 7K, and if you just train yourself, spend hours. I mean, I literally used to do that. I don't tend to do it so much anymore, but I will actually do ear training sometimes. If I'm bored or I've got nothing else to do, but I feel like I want to do something constructive, I do ear training and I listen to, I don't know, I'll make a 909 drum beat and I'll listen to what happens when I boost, 1500 Hertz, or if I cut out 180 Hertz, those kind of things. But just train yourself. Please, again, I want to reiterate, I'm not saying that visual reference is a bad thing and that you shouldn't use it. But what I am saying is don't rely on it, or at least try and train yourself so that you don't have to rely on it. So thanks for watching. This is the Quakes Motel. My name's Conan. Till next time.